What does the Michael Cohen sentencing mean for President Trump? What does Maria Butina's plea deal mean for the Mueller investigation? Will Trump shut down the government over border wall funding? And find out what the media missed in our most underreported stories of the week. I'm Heather Godwin, and this is The Square Circle. Welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, political reporter James Rosen, and Michael Schindler of Young Voices. Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you all back.
Thank you.
Great to be
All
here.
right.
This week, President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Here's the story from NBC News.
President Trump's longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, is going to jail. Cohen has just been sentenced in a New York City courtroom on multiple charges, including his role in paying hush money during the 2016 election to two women alleged to have had affairs with Trump. Payments prosecutors say were coordinated with and directed by Donald Trump himself.
Cohen himself spoke to the court today, saying that he lost his way, that his blind loyalty to Trump led him to choose darkness over light.
All right, gdclay.com, we'll start with you. So, is this the beginning of the collapse for Trump's house of cards?
That's a very good question. And I figure two persons or two parties or two entities may have the final answer. It could be AMI, also known as American Media Incorporated, which owns National Enquirer, of course, who I interviewed with a couple of years ago in New York, which was a wild experience. And also Nancy Pelosi in the House. You know, whenever if someone brings up the I word, also known as impeachment. Michael Cohen now goes to prison for 3 years. What, $1 million worth of restitution the guy has to pay? He admitted that he performed the quote-unquote dirty deeds for one Donald Trump. So now he'll forever be known as the dirty deeds dude, Triple D. But you know, Donald Trump is like a cat with 9 lives. You know, Schindler, I'm sure, will agree. You know, Rosen, I'm sure, won't. And we shall see. You know, I mean, should the Democrats try to impeach him, you know, after the Mueller investigation, et cetera, et cetera? And AMI, American Media, you know, is going to be a major player in this because they know where David Pecker, who the CEO of American Media, knows where all the bodies are buried. And surely he has tremendous information, or else the government will not have cut that deal with David Pecker to get more and more information in exchange for him not being prosecuted. So the next few months, especially starting in January, when the Democrats for real take over the House, it's going to be a very interesting and compelling situation. Time will tell.
James Rosen, what's your response?
Well, it seems like every day we say that the development in the Trump-Russia case, which keeps spreading with many tentacles, is incredibly significant. We said that about when we saw Mr. Cohen's plea deal, and now today people are talking about the guilty plea, the first guilty plea in this entire saga of Ms. Butina, who we'll talk about later. So, you know, I think this is kind of a drip, drip, drip over time of at least suspicious-looking activities and actions, and we'll see where we end up. But none of it is good for President Trump.
Michael Schindler, what's your opinion?
I think that given the Republicans control the Senate, impeachment isn't going to happen. But I do think that one of the things this is going to affect is getting folks into Trump's inner circle. Right now, Trump's already having a hard time finding a new chief of staff. to replace John Kelly. And like a lot of insiders, a lot of people with the requisite experience are afraid of getting burned because they're afraid that they're going to get the Michael Cohen treatment.
Oh, this is a good point. Well, Michael Cohen is certainly an interesting character. I mean, he's definitely got direct ties to Russia based on his upbringing in New York, and his father is from the Ukraine. And one thing that President Trump said that confused me was he said that he does not dispute directing Cohen to make payments to women who accused him of having an affair in order to keep them quiet. But he said he did not direct Cohen to break the law while doing so. This is from CNN. Isn't that alone breaking the law?
Well, it sounds like what Donald Trump is doing is he's using the attorney-client, well, not really, privilege, but to free himself. In other words, it appears that what his defense is going to be is a quote-unquote advice of counsel. In other words, I am operating strictly under the advice of counsel. In other words, Michael Cohen, i.e. Triple D, the Dirty Deeds dude, told me to do this. Now, he's my attorney, okay? So he knows the law. I don't. So don't look at me. Look at your boy over here, Mr. Cohen. And that's what it sounds like. That sounds like what he's angling with that.
Okay. That explains his thinking that this is making him look less.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Cohen is a confessed liar. Donald Trump would assert that he's never told a lie, but nobody believes it. So you have two liars now telling, who used to be close associates and close friends, now telling diametrically opposite stories, and a lot's going to come down, I think, to the documentation that the prosecutors took from Cohen's office when they raided it. Supposedly, there's a lot of materials, and so this is not going to be based. This is not going to be just a he said. I won't say he said, she said. It's going to be a lot more than that. And if there is documentation about a lot of these allegations, then I think President Trump is in hot water.
Right. Plus, you have the audio that Chris Cuomo of CNN obtained. Remember, because
the telephone call.
Exactly. The audio of Donald Trump talking to Michael Cohen, and about how they're plotting, the next step and everything. They bring up Alan Weisselberg and everything, how to get the money and on. And of course, again, David Pecker, should be a huge entity in this situation, from American Media Incorporated, National Enquirer.
He bought the story in order to kill it.
Right. The Cameron Dougal story.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, we'll see where this goes. I'd like to remind our viewers you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, or via Facebook or Twitter, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Also this week, the strange case of Russian national Maria Butina took another turn. Here's ABC News coverage.
She's a student, she's a Russian national, she's a lover of America and of Russia, but she is not a Russian agent by any means.
But prosecutors told a different story, claiming she was leveraging her relationship for access to the Republican elite, even coming face to face with the future president.
Do you want to continue the politics of sanctions?
I believe I would get along very nicely with Putin. Okay?
All allegedly done at the behest of a Russian banker with close ties to the Kremlin.
James Rosen, she pleaded guilty. How significant is it, and what does it mean for the Trump-Russia probe?
I think it's significant. I was a correspondent in Moscow some years back. I speak Russian. I know some folks in Russia, not that they know anything about any of this, but I even have cliff notes for the first time, because this is trying to follow all of this is more and more like reading a Tolstoy novel. There's more and more characters involved with long Russian names. But I'll tell you two Russian names to keep in mind that I think Americans are going to become more familiar with as it relates to Ms. Butina. One of them is an oligarch. His name is Konstantin Nikolaev, and he paid for a couple or a few of her trips to the United States. these days in Russia, if you're an oligarch, the oligarchs who were against Putin, President Putin, have either been exiled or killed. The only oligarchs left are pro-Putin oligarchs. And so if an oligarch is doing this, then Putin likely knows about it. And then the second gentleman to remember, his name is Alexander Torshin. He's now the retired deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank, but at the time when this all started about 3 years ago, he was the deputy governor. He was the number 2 leader of the Russian Central Bank. The Russian Central Bank is extremely powerful. It's very close to President Putin and other top Russian officials because it controls so much money. And he was also involved with her, and I think that the FBI has been allegedly investigating him for all kinds of possible shenanigans, separate from Trump, since 2013. So they've been all over him, and I think that she reportedly had ties with officials who worked for the FSB. That's the successor agency to the KGB. It's the highest Russian spy agency. She had contacts with them, and this all started when she was 27 years old. Her multiple types of outreach to introduce senior Russian officials to senior Republican officials, the NRA and senior Republican officials, and I just don't believe that a 27-year-old Russian girl, young woman, as attractive as she might be, can be doing all of that solo. I just don't think it's true. The last thing I'll say is that Mr. Torshin, the deputy governor of the central bank, financed and ran exchanges where he sent young Russians to the United States, ostensibly on student exchanges, but it's coming out now that really what he was doing was he was using these exchanges to recruit future Russian spies. So to say there's a lot of smoke here is an understatement. There's flaming smoke.
Michael Schindler with Young Voices, how significant is this and what does it mean for the Trump?
Sure. So as far as I know, the most that she did was facilitate communication between the Trump campaign and Trump's inner circle with Russian government officials. That in of itself isn't that bad. It's important for political actors to be in constant communication with each other. But I do see a lot of people sort of saying, oh, there's tons of smoke here, there must be fire, there must be collusion. But everything I learn about Maria and what she's sort of done while in America, it gets sort of goofy. She's hanging out with Republican officials singing Beauty and the Beast at Moscow karaoke bars. She's just a character out of James Bond and more out of Seinfeld. I wouldn't be too worried.
That's a perfect cover for a spy.
Yeah, great cover.
Graduate student at American University.
Yeah, American University. And I'm wondering about what happens to her. Presumably she's going to prison. Am I right? At some point, am I right?
I think that's the assumption.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm curious what happens to her after her term is up. I mean, does the United States deport her and she goes back to Russia? And there's been talk that she really can't go back to Russia. Why? Because she goes back there, she might end up at the bottom of a river somewhere.
Little poison.
There you go, poison. There you go, poison. That's right. That's what I forgot. The Russian is into this poison thing.
Yeah,
that's right.
They've got it down.
That's right. Got down pat. I noticed. Talk to other people in other countries, and so and there's been talk that she may just end up just staying in the United States. Well,
one thing that's significant, and I neglected to say, is that she pled guilty to conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
Yes, and this is the first time that, and you were saying that she was merely in contact trying to facilitate kind of friendly exchanges. But the key issue is, what was she in contact with them about? And she was in contact with the Russians and over an alleged attempt to influence the 2016 election. That's what she was in contact with them about, and so that's what matters. It's not just the contact; it's the nature of the contact.
And what about this boyfriend that she's been with, Paul Erickson, I believe his name is? He apparently has a bit of a shady past himself. While serving as the national treasurer for Yale's chapter of college Republicans, Eric started a friendship with Jack Abramoff, a notoriously corrupt lobbyist. So he seems to be a little suspect.
Yeah, I think there are this whole circle of people, Americans and Russians, are kind of having a contest, kind of a race to the bottom. Who can be more suspicious? It's not guilty. It can't be proven guilt in the court of law yet. But
all right, we'll see where this goes. Do you have a final comment?
Well, I don't think that like the fact of merely being associated with Jack Abramoff, I don't think is too damning, considering that Jack Abramoff had very, very extensive ties, and if he was merely like a Yale like functionary, like as a student, I could seem odd to damn him for just being friends with a powerful lobbyist.
Well, I didn't know if it spoke to his character. And finally, President Trump threatened to shut down the federal government if the next budget deal does not include funding for a border wall. Here he is in the Oval Office with Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And
We
I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll
We
tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.
All right, Michael Schindler with Young Voices. Will these threats make a difference in votes?
Well, a difference in votes when?
With the upcoming, in votes to pass the wall before a government shutdown.
So, I'd hope so. I certainly wouldn't want to see the government shut down. I do think that both there are plenty of Democrats and plenty of Republicans who want to see the government not shut down. It seems like a decent thing. It's like sort of like a bare minimum thing as they've been doing. And investing a bit in a wall seems to me to be a reasonable thing. The caravan is proof that there are folks who want to cross our southern border and get into the United States. A wall is an effective way of stopping them from doing that and saving everyone lots of tears and heartbreak and costs. So yeah, I think it will make a difference in votes. I hope it makes a big enough difference to avoid a government shutdown. That's the hope.
And there's talk that the Democrats are willing to go some way on this wall thing, but they want to bargain. And it appears, at least the last I heard, that the DACA issue could be a part of this.
Oh, the DACA issue?
Yeah, right. In other words, okay, Mr. Trump, we'll give you some bread for your wall, but let's resolve the DACA issue. Let's, those young people, many of whom are already in college, the United States is really the only country they know, even though their parents are from other countries, et cetera, et cetera. It's time to finally resolve this DACA issue. But Donald Trump wants, $5 billion, right? And it sounds like the Democrats don't want to give up $5 billion. I've heard maybe $2 billion, but the Democrats obviously aren't going to do this unless they can cash in some bargaining chip, something that they can get out of this. And it sounds like DACA may be at the core of this in terms of the Democrats, Chuck and Nancy, as Donald Trump likes to say. It's like a mantra with him. There's always Chuck and Nancy. There's never Nancy and Chuck. So, but the DACA issue could be a major part of the situation.
James Rosen, what's your opinion?
Well, one of the strange things about the bizarre White House meeting between Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and President Trump was that when he took out his notes and he was reading off of his notes, he actually acknowledged that there are sections of the border that do not have a wall that nonetheless are effectively keeping Mexicans and other folks out of the country because of other surveillance measures, which was the argument of his opponents, both Republican opponents and Secretary Clinton during the presidential race, which is why we don't need to build an entire wall across the entire border. So he was arguing kind of both sides of the issue. I found it to be very strange. So you can see where he's already creating cover for himself, in my mind, in case he has to back down, in case he doesn't get all the money, in case he has to back down, in case an entire wall doesn't get built, which nobody believes is going to happen.
Well, and I've heard them talk about security, to some kind of security. He kind of threw that out there partway through, and I've heard talk of not building a wall, but investing in other forms of security. Do you think he would be willing to settle for that as opposed to an actual physical wall?
I think that, well, we already do that in lots of sections of the border. We have like fences and just patrols that patrol areas where folks don't usually come by because the physical conditions on the other side are just so hard that nobody bothers to cross. We usually have walls up where folks are most likely to cross. The thing is, like, now that there are walls up, people are going to the second most easiest spot to cross over. So I do think that he will settle in some spaces for less than a wall, but certainly there are lots of spaces across the border that do merit a wall, and I think that he won't settle there.
And he also may use, because I've heard some other Republicans say this, that Donald Trump sometimes, it's always sometimes or maybe part of the time with him, because you know how your boy is. You know, he can change like the weather. But he may settle not a wall literally, but some other form, you know, and he might use that for cover also, you know, because Rosen was alluding to the term cover before.
Yeah, just like President Obama did it.
Right.
To still say that he won.
That way he can still say, yeah, hey, I won.
All right, great. Well, let's take some questions from our viewers. Dorian Anderson, do you think there's any connection between Maria Butina and the Russians' attempts to sway the 2016 U.S. election? Who wants to take that question?
Absolutely. I have no doubt. As I said before, she was 27 when this outreach started. 27-year-old is not doing these sorts of things by herself. She had powerful backers, including the former deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank, which is extremely powerful. She had ties to the FSB, the KGB successor agency. I think she was not doing this alone.
Does anybody else have a comment?
Well, with something like this, I agree with Rosen. There has to be some other parties involved. Hostile actors, they call them. No offense, because I know you're an actor. But,
I'm not hostile.
but you're not hostile. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, one person, no way. There has to be some kind of a web, like, you know, Charlotte's Web or whatever kind of web you're talking about. You know, it has to be some kind of a scheme and scammers, you know.
What about the NRA? Conspiracy? Don't they fit in there with the schemers, scammers, as far as, you know, the conduit? And donating a lot of money that perhaps came from Russia thanks to Maria?
Well, that, I don't know about that.
Certainly not willful scammers. Like a lot of folks met Maria in good faith, and they talked to her as they would talk to any other Second Amendment advocate. I think that you can't call those people scammers or people who are scheming to, what's it called? To aid Russia in its designs. Those are people who, like in the conservative movement, who are merely working with what they thought was somebody working in sincerity and good faith.
Yeah, but they were wrong.
All right. Well, let's take a question from our next viewer, Matthew Wise. Thanks for writing in. How would a border wall prevent drug cartels from smuggling drugs into the U.S.? This is a good question. Who would like to take that?
I'll take it.
Okay.
So one of the ways that cartels smuggle drugs into the U.S., aside from shipping drugs, is by just taking it across the border physically on foot. It's not the preferred method for most sorts of drugs, especially like fentanyl, which is very, very small and you could hide in lots of things. But for bulkier sorts of drugs, it's the easiest way to get something across because those are the sorts of drugs that Border Patrol will usually pick up. So if you're a cartel and you have a wall in the way, it makes your job a lot harder.
To get the drugs across?
Yeah.
Okay, but what about other forms of transportation? You know, sea, air?
Tunnels.
Tunnels?
Yeah,
They're
underground?
masters of tunnels.
Underground?
The cartels build incredibly
quite-
intricate tunnels.
They're quite good, but those are more expensive than really walking. So they make the job of the cartels even harder. Like a good wall.
So in other words, you're all for the wall, right?
In certain parts, yeah. It's like assuming it's cheaply funded and we do it well, yeah.
All right, and now it's time for the most underreported story of the week. Who would like to start?
I'll start. It's a sad story. An Army Special Forces major named Matthew Goldstein was charged with murder. The special forces, of course, are the most elite forces and troops that we have. He has a sterling hero's record in Afghanistan. This gentleman has fought in Afghanistan several times, but he was charged with murdering a Taliban enemy bomb maker who was in custody. And of course, bomb maker is a bad guy, but we're not supposed to kill people that we have in custody. We're supposed to, guard them. And I think that, in a way, the fact that he's been charged shows that our system is working, because there's a lot of countries in which if a decorated special forces army major killed an enemy bomb maker, he would not be charged with murder.
Michael Schindler, where'd you go next?
Sure. So one interesting underreported story is Senator Jack Reed earlier this year had submitted a question to U.S. Central Command about reimbursements in Yemen. Apparently, a lot of Saudi and UAE planes were refueling, and they weren't paying the U.S. For those bouts of refueling. And apparently, that total cost amounts to about $331 million. And the DoD is going to be trying to get some of that back quite soon. So good news.
Very interesting. Gregory Clay,
Yes.
JimmyClay.com.
Yes.
You're on.
Clay. The social media was burning up Thursday morning on this chief of staff issue in regards to Donald Trump. Word was circulating big time that Newt Gingrich was the front runner.
Yes.
You heard about that. And Newt Gingrich said, no, it's not me. I think what fueled a lot of the speculation was that Newt was seen at the White House on Wednesday, I believe. Again, he says it's not him. And now there's talk that perhaps it will be Chris Christie. So we shall see. And in addition to all that, Barack Obama was named the Robert F. Kennedy Ripple of Hope Awards recipient on Wednesday night in New York at the annual Ripple of Hope Gala, the R.F. Kennedy organization that's run by his daughter, Kerry Kennedy. So another award for Barack Obama in his retirement.
Well, as if the White House doesn't need more kind of huge personalities who say outlandish things, I think they should make either Chris Christie or Newt Gingrich chief of staff. I mean, I think that's just what they need.
It's a little bit more theater.
They don't have enough theater. They
Strong
don't have
personalities.
They don't have enough controversy.
Well, Piers Morgan actually raised his hand. Do you remember that?
Morgan,
Piers Morgan was interested. Well, we never know.
Well, I hope personally. I hope it is Chris Christie or Newt Gingrich. Have strong personalities, because then there'll never be another dull moment.
But President Trump would never allow that,
because he doesn't want anybody bigger than him, right?
Jared Kushner
he has to
wouldn't
be
allow
in the
that.
middle.
Trump might.
And why wouldn't Jared?
Because Chris Christie put away his father in jail, and that's why there's.
That's right. When Chris Christie was the prosecutor, right? Right. Yeah, but there's another school of thought that Donald Trump would love Newt Gingrich or Chris Christie because it'll prove that he can still lure. Keyword lure, L-U-R-E, big names to the White House.
All right, that's all for this week. I'm Heather Godwin, and thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.